Today, I'm at a place steeped in show business history, and who best to talk to about show business than Richard Cobourne. Well, Richard, you've been in show business for over 40 years. How has technology moved on during that time?
I think I'm so old that in the early days of Broadway Studio A, it was still in black and white with turret lenses. You know, you would never have dreamt in those days of possibly having any form of video recording equipment in your lounge, never mind in your pocket. I think the great thing of working for the BBC for, nearly 15 years was that if you think of a television programme or a radio programme, it brings together all sorts of different disciplines. It brings together thoughts and creative people and technical people, and it reminds you above all it is the story. And without a story, without a tale to tell, truth well told if you like, we are nothing.
Well, let's talk about the world of exhibitions. What sort of challenges have you got in the audiovisual areas there?
How do you attract people onto the booth? How do we keep people on the booth? How do we get over the key messages? How do we engage the delegates in a way that engages them for their agenda, not our agenda? The cart, if you like, is being put before the horse. What's the purpose of the exhibition booth? You know, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to sell?
And what about the lighting in these exhibition areas? I mean, some of the places I've been to recently have been awful.
I once got asked by a procurement person, why do you need a floor when the exhibition hall's already got a floor? Why do you need lighting when the exhibition hall has already got lighting? Well, an exhibition booth has to be a theatrical experience. We treat it as if we're lighting a theatrical set. You know, the brighter the exhibition booth, the more the delegates come because they think it's very important, and it's got to look attractive.
And I would imagine that LED lighting plays a big part in this too.
You know, if you've got some booths where you've got 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt of lighting, you know, that can easily cost you £10,000 for the week. Whereas nowadays, the LED lighting, it's 5,000 quid, 2,000 quid, you know, it's nothing.
I went to a conference the other week and the video inserts didn't work properly, the lighting was terrible.
Everybody thinks that you can just ruck up and do it. Nobody thinks you've got to have rehearsals. Nobody thinks you've got to have planning meetings. Nobody thinks you've got to look at each other's slides. Nobody thinks that what's the message? You know, nobody thinks, why are we having this conference? And I think of the most important of all this is, it's the old thing, isn't it? Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. The best events we've ever put on are events where we have a long-lasting relationship with the client. And I can say to the client, look, this isn't right. And depending upon that relationship, you know, you're able to have some pretty full, free and frank exchanges of views. I mean, I do ponce it up, I make no bones about that. Everyone thinks that.
And you have pointed and you know,
yes,
and been quite dominant?
Yes, because that's the job of the producer. You know, the job of the producer is to produce the show. Now, if they want a yes person, that's fine, go somewhere else.
But do you think it's a lack of ambition during the procurement process?
Procurement are very good at buying things that they can specify. I can specify this house brick. I can specify its weight, you know, its fundamental engineering limits. How do you specify emotion? How do you specify audience engagement? How do you specify something that means that, you know, my tender for £100,000 is that much better than that one for £50,000? You know, you've got to go through the budgets and you've got to explain to people, and the people, you know, the whole part of the team have got to understand, well, hang on a minute, why did that take you 3 days when somebody else said they could do it in 2 hours, you know? You know, this film today, for example, nobody believed it took 4 days to shoot.
Well, let's talk about what happens at the end of the conference. People want to go home, maybe they're slightly hungover from the bar. What are the takeaways at the end?
If you're going to ask the question about the end, you've got to ask the question about the beginning. You've got to engage the audience before the show starts. Why should they turn up? What should they expect? How do you generate excitement before people arrive? So you've got that in advance. You've made sure that everybody wants to go to the event and everyone understands why they're going to the event. You then got to deliver the event.
Now, during the event itself, how are people engaging with social media? I know you've got quite strong views on this.
It's not business media, it's social media. And I think that there are some aspects of social media that work very well within business, but there are some aspects of social media that should remain exactly that, social. you know, you don't want people looking at their iPhones, their iPods, their Androids, whatever. You want people concentrating on the screen. You want people concentrating on what people are saying, concentrating on the message. And if they're busy tweeting and social mediaing, they're not, particularly us chaps who can only do one thing at a time.
What about 4K technology? Is that something which you can offer your clients?
I've never had a client come to me and say, we want it in HD, we want it in SD, we want it in 4K. And I think we have to be very careful. But equally, I think it also gives us huge opportunities for excitement. All these tools are there to make the engagement with the audience more spectacular. You can create a huge wow factor. Technology, I think, is fantastic. You know, what we can do with it now is limited only by our imagination. And I think with virtual reality, augmented reality, all 3D, all sorts of things. I'm stunned that 3D hasn't been used more in conference settings.
Well, thanks very much for coming in to talk to us today, Richard.
Neville, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. It is interesting examining why we do what we do.